Coming to the epidemiology of cardiovascular disease, it is the leading cause of death not only in the entire world but also in India, and contributes to almost 1/3 of the mortality. And the most disturbing fact is that almost 12 to 16% of coronary artery disease patients are less than 40 years. So less than 40 years by definition is CAD in young. Then the other risk factors in 21st century lifestyle are diabetes, dyslipidemia, hypertension, various thrombotic factors, behavioral and lifestyle, demography, and genetic factors. So the crucial role of risk factors in the development of coronary heart disease, the understanding of the fact is I feel is the most important advancement in the understanding of atherosclerosis. By conventional risk factors, we mean a combination of cigarette smoking, diabetes, hyperlipidemia, and hypertension. And the constellation of these four risk factors are generally termed as the conventional risk factors. And there is enough evidence to show that treatment of risk factors, of these conventional risk factors, they reduce the risk of future cardiac events. There is no doubt about it. But it is seen all over the world that people who ultimately develop coronary heart disease, they usually tend to have a single, or some even do not have the traditional risk factors. Therefore, atherosclerosis nowadays is thought to be a chronic low-grade inflammatory condition. And because of this idea, there's a lot of research going on in this field. And I'll try to highlight what are the important research that are going on at present in the world. Just a quick recap about the pathogenesis of atherosclerosis. So entry of the monocyte via the endothelium and the entry of the LDL in the inflammatory site and the oxidation of the LDL. This is the vital point which acts as a trigger for the activation of the various pathways. So action of oxidized LDL on monocytes and the dendritic cells, they usually activate the NFK-beta and the kynurenine pathway. This ultimately leads to release of various types of inflammatory markers, especially CRP, TNF, interleukin 1 and 6, CD40, etc. And they lead to the VCAM1 and the ICAM1. These are the addition molecules in the endothelial layer. And they ultimately set up the vicious cycle of inflammation. So, apart from ischemic heart disease, there are certain other cardiovascular disorders where inflammation plays a very important role. Just to name them, if we have in aortic aneurysms, so inflammation definitely has important role. Apart from it, hypertension, myocarditis, pericarditis, peripheral arterial disease, and stress. So what are the biomarkers? How do we know that inflammation is ongoing? So measurement of CRP, especially when measured by the high sensitivity assay, this is the most widely studied marker. Apart from these, there are other markers like cytokines, IL-1, IL-6, then various others like P-selectin, CD4 ligand, myeloperoxidase, etc. So, do we need to test all these biomarkers? It is not possible. Financially, it will be a total waste of money. So, what are the limitations of these various markers of inflammation? So, first is there are certain analytical limitations. Therefore, they are of reduced clinical usefulness. They have a too short half-life for clinical testing. And ability to predict risk in the setting of broad general population is very limited. So these are the disadvantages, and you do not need to test for all the markers of inflammation in each and every patient. But from the point of view of research, few molecules have definitely been studied, like the soluble CD40 ligand, especially during the early phase of an acute coronary syndrome during plaque rupture, or during acute ischemia where myeloperoxidase has been measured in certain patients for purely experimental purposes. And then there is an association which is seen with the ST2 levels with heart failure and ischemia. So what are the markers which are available commercially, or what are the markers that we can use? First is undoubtedly the HS-CRP, which we always see nowadays. All physicians, the patients do come walk into your office with a report of the CRP. So this is most widely used and widely studied. Then there's another one which was recently, a few laboratories tried to push for this test, that is the PLA2, LPPLA2. So the LPPLA2, as per published data, there is no definite relationship with vascular risk because it is bound to ApoB, and this correlates very strongly with LDL levels. So we do not get any additional information, or does not add to the risk of an individual. And expert reviews which are available, they say that routine measurement of LPPLA2 is not recommended. So coming to HS-CRP, this is the best studied, as I had said, and the most widely used biomarker. And whether it is only a risk marker or it has a direct role, or does it directly cause atherosclerosis, this is very controversial. In patients with cardiovascular disease who have high levels of HS-CRP, they are definitely at a higher risk for death or future ischemic events. And among healthy persons, high levels of HS-CRP, they can predict the risk for a myocardial infarction, stroke, peripheral arterial disease, sudden cardiac death. So this is definitely very important both in patients with established cardiovascular disease and those who are apparently healthy. And HS-CRP levels, they add to the prognostic information at all levels of LDL-C and also at all levels of the Framingham risk score. So HS-CRP is an important biomarker for inflammation. If you see the cardiovascular event-free survival among the healthy persons according to baseline levels of HS-CRP and LDL cholesterol, it is very interesting to see that those persons with high levels of LDL but low levels of CRP, they do well compared to patients who have a high CRP but a low HDL. That means that CRP definitely has a very important role in prevention of preventing events, ischemic events, in persons who are having even having low LDL. So this is known to everyone, and the AHA and the CDC. So levels less than 1 indicate low vascular risk, 1 to 3 moderate vascular risk, and more than 3 indicates high vascular risk. So do we need to measure HS-CRP in all patients? So there is no consensus at the moment, but it is at the discretion of the physician, and it should be as part of a global risk evaluation, and it should not replace the routine measurement of a fasting lipid profile. And it is most useful in those persons who are at intermediate risk, that is, those who have a 10-year event rate chance of having an event between 5 to 20%. And if we have values of CRP which is more than 8, then it usually means there's some concomitant infection, and we do need to repeat it at least after 2 to 3 weeks. So in 2003, the recommendations were such that measurement of HS-CRP may help direct further evaluation and therapy in primary prevention of CVD. And the entire adult population should not be screened for HS-CRP. In 2010, as time passed, things also changed, and they said measure CRP in apparently healthy elderly people to identify cardiovascular risk. And in 2013, the use of CRP for stratifying the high-risk patients for CVD should be done. So the importance, to stress upon the importance of high level of HS-CRP, that is more than 3, it can also predict other events like recurrent coronary events and thrombotic complications after angioplasty. Suppose a patient who has undergone coronary angioplasty, we have a high HS-CRP level he does tend to have a higher risk compared to a patient with a low level of CRP to have a stent thrombosis. Then it also indicates poor outcome in the setting of unstable angina and vascular complication after bypass surgery. And also it has a role in cardiac syndrome X. Cardiac syndrome X is basically nothing but a patient presenting with atypical chest pain with a normal coronary angiogram. So usually in this patient subset of patients, we tend to see high levels of hsCRP. And it may also sometimes indicate onset of type 2 DM. So all these data, they do support the concept that inflammation plays a critical role throughout the atherosclerotic process. So targeting of inflammation as a potential objective for therapeutic intervention in patients with ischemic heart disease is definitely gaining importance in the present day. And to just take a look very briefly, what are the interventions that we need to do for primary prevention in patients with high CRP levels? So undoubtedly, without any doubt, the first line of treatment should be correction of your diet, regular exercise, and smoking cessation. These are the first line of interventions, undoubtedly. Then use of statin therapy to reduce vascular risk among individuals with high CRP, even with low LDL cholesterol levels. This concept has come into view into importance after the landmark Jupiter trial. So if you see the Jupiter trial, this was a trial of statin therapy among healthy men and women with LDL cholesterol less than 130 and a CRP more than 2. And they found that the primary endpoint of the study, which was vascular risk, all-cause vascular risk, as well as infarction, CV deaths, revascularization, hospitalization for unstable angina, and all-cause mortality were all reduced, significantly reduced. In a sub-study of the Jupiter trial patients, which was published in 2009 in Lancet, and they said that those who not only reduced LDL to less than 70, but also reduced CRP to less than 1, had an 80% risk reduction. So that was very significant. That means achieving 12 goal, that is LDL less than 70 and CRP of less than 2 is extremely important. And this has also been proven in patients in secondary prevention in the PROVE-IT-TIMI-22 trial, where patients with LDL less than 70 and CRP less than 2, they had a much less event rate. So can targeted anti-inflammatory therapy reduce cardiovascular event rates and prolong life? So let us just examine, I'll just highlight the inflammatory pathways which are potential targets for atherosclerotic therapies. So it is a very complex process. At present, the clinically important medicines which are being tried out, I'll just highlight them. One is canakinumab, the other is low-dose methotrexate, and third is darapladib. So these three I'll just try and stress upon. So first is the canakinumab. This is an IL-1 beta inhibitor. It is a monoclonal antibody which targets IL-1 beta. The second is low-dose methotrexate, and third I'll be talking on darapladib. Darapladib is an inhibitor of PLA2. So two large-scale trials which are ongoing, and these are placebo-controlled trials using targeted anti-inflammatory agents for secondary prevention of MI. The first is the CANTOS trial. This trial has used canakinumab, and they want to evaluate whether interleukin-1 beta inhibition as compared to placebo can reduce rates of recurrent MI, stroke, and cardiovascular death among stable coronary artery disease patients who remain at high vascular risk due to high CRP, that is more than 2, despite contemporary secondary prevention. So this is an ongoing trial, and results are expected in 2017. But at 4 months of use of this drug, they showed that this was published in Circulation, there was significant reduction in the inflammatory markers of interleukin-6 and C-reactive protein. The second trial is the SIRT trial. This will evaluate whether low-dose methotrexate, where they use a dose of 20 mg per week, as compared to placebo, will reduce major vascular events among a group of, this is amongst post-myocardial infarction patients with either diabetes or metabolic syndrome, groups known to have high risk on the basis of a persistent pro-inflammatory response. So together, these two trials, the CANTOS and the SIRT, they represent a core test of the inflammation hypothesis of atrial thrombosis and the exploration of a potential new phase for cardiovascular therapeutics. Coming to Darapladib, there are two large trials which have already been published, but the results are not very encouraging. The first is the stability trial, which was published in the New England Journal of Medicine in 2014, where Darapladib was used for preventing ischemic events in stable coronary heart disease. And they concluded that in patients with stable CHD, this drug did not significantly reduce the risk of primary composite endpoint of CV, death, MI, or stroke. The second trial with the same drug, this was published in the Journal of the American Medical Association. This was in 2014, where they wanted to see the effect of Darapladib on major coronary events after an acute coronary syndrome. This was the SOLID-TIMI-52 randomized trial. And this trial concluded that in patients who experience an acute coronary event, direct inhibition of PLA2 with this drug added to optimal medical therapy and initiated within 30 days of hospitalization did not reduce the risk of major coronary events. Then another, coming to the unconventional, or what should I call it, medicines. Curcumin, this is basically a refined extract of haldi. So they have certain small studies have also shown benefits by acting on the NFK beta pathway. So if you just want to see the mechanism of action, so it prevents activation of the NFK beta pathway and prevents translocation into the nucleus, and the release of, finally, prevents the release of inflammatory mediators. And curcumin has multiple sites of action. So the different studies which have shown benefits are, it decreases the CRP, it decreases MI associated with bypass surgery, it significantly reduces serum cholesterol, and prevents progression of diabetic nephropathy by different mechanisms. And it decreases the fasting blood glucose, the A1C levels, and insulin resistance. So to conclude, atrial thrombosis has been recognized as an inflammatory disease. CRP as a marker of inflammation is most extensively studied and identified patients with established vascular disease who are at high risk for death or future ischemic events. Then lower levels of hsCRP, when achieved with adequate statin therapy in patients with established heart disease, have better long-term prognosis. This has already been proved. So additional research is ongoing to clarify whether inflammation should be a target for routine strategies of risk reduction or novel therapeutic agents in patients with atherosclerosis. Thank you.